Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Raise.dev Hacktoberfest Help Desk. My name is Joe, and I'm your host for two of our free shows today. If you are new to the Hacktoberfest Help Desk, we are your resources Hacktoberfest to help you land all of your pull requests, whether you are looking for help with a project you've already found and already contributing to, or you're still trying to find that project and still trying to get those contributions in the last 7 days. We are coming to you live 3 times a day, every weekday in Hacktoberfest, to give you tips and tricks about how to make the most of Hacktoberfest and to help you find new projects and new ways of contributing. We have lots of guests who come on the show to talk to us about things other than code and other ways of contributing to projects. So today we do have another special guest again, and we have 2 more shows after this one. Stick around at the end of the show and I'll give you a preview of what's to come. And in just a moment, I'll bring on our guest for this show. But before that, a couple of house notes, a couple of things to go through. So first of all, you can find our schedule for the weeks at twitch.tv RaiseDev schedule. That is updated on a weekly basis. So right now, that schedule is all but useless because it's only valid for today. So if you read that schedule, only read Friday. The rest of it is garbage. Throw it away. Over the weekend, I will update the schedule for the contents of next week. But the 2 more shows that we've got today, I'll cover at the end of the show. The other thing to note is, as I said, we are here to help you. So you can ask questions in chat anytime and we will try and answer them. If your question is relevant to what we're talking about right now, it's super easy for us to get to that as we're kind of talking. If your question is something entirely different, still super welcome, but please be patient. We'll finish up the topic we're working on and work around your question before the show ends. So do not worry, we will get to all of your questions. If you want to share a link or anything, such as like you want to share a cool resource or a project you're working on, that's again super welcome. But the internet is a spammy place, and so we have a bot that filters links. That's not a problem. You can absolutely share your links. Just at RaiseDevs in the chat, let me know you're going to post a link, and I'll make sure the bot doesn't filter your links. No, at least once a stream, someone gets themselves put in the corner by the bot. So don't let that be you today. Just at RaiseDevs, and I'll save you from the wrath of Nightbot. The only other piece of house trivia, I guess, to do. Hello, Manan. Thank you for joining us. The last thing is, if you haven't heard of Raise.dev, so if you have no idea who we are or what we do, we are a service to help you level up in your developer career, whether you're trying to get your first job, trying to career change, trying to move from mid-level to senior, whatever jump or whatever step up you're trying to take, we have expert coaches who will help you do just that. They'll help you get the experience you need to make that transition in your career and to get to where you want to be. And whilst we're in early access, we are completely free. You can sign up at Raise.dev. Hey, P-Hacks, thanks for joining. So that's all my preliminaries out of the way. That just leaves me to bring on our wonderful guest for the day. Please welcome Josh to the stage. How you doing, Josh?
Hi, Joe. I'm doing great. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thank you. I love your background. It's very jazzy.
Thank you very much. It's very, very colorful. We love colors here at Orbit.
I noticed before we went live, we use a royalty-free music app for the music we play before the stream. The song that it chose completely without me having any input into that at all before the stream was Universe, which is very appropriate to having Orbit on the show.
So appropriate. It's like the universe knows or something like that. A sign from the universe. Exactly. That was very good. It was a really nice 30 seconds of bobbing my head up and down. You're really excited.
Our royalty-free upbeat playlist is full of bobs. So would you like to introduce yourself to folks who haven't met you before?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Josh. I'm the co-founder and CTO of a company called Orbit. Before that, I was a developer advocate. I would say I'm still a developer advocate. There's just a lot of extra stuff that goes with that now. I'm a developer advocate for a few companies before that, for Algolia, for Keen.io, and I've been a software engineer for a number of years, doing a lot of Ruby, Rails, JavaScript, Java, distributed systems. So I've been all over the place in terms of building systems, writing code. But what really gets me excited these days is building communities and helping developers be successful.
That's awesome. So to give a little bit of an idea of how the show works for the folks who are new, we tend to like starting the show talking a little bit about our guest and their career and how they got to where they are. And I have questions about not only how you got to where you are, but how Orbit in particular came to be, because that's, to me, a very interesting journey. And then we'll flip that script a little bit towards the back end of the show and get into some code. And I believe today we're doing what we call maintain a show and tell, and that Josh has brought a project for us to dive into, which is a project I'm particularly excited about because it's looking at Reveal, which we'll talk more about if you haven't encountered before, but it's a super neat framework. So I guess to start, I obviously want to talk about Orbit because as a developer community person, I'm obsessed with Orbit and feel like I spend at least part of my week every day talking about Orbit. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what Orbit is, and then we can work back from there into like the genesis of Orbit, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So we describe Orbit as a community experience platform, and the users of Orbit are community managers and developer advocates who are trying to manage a community around in a number of different places. One thing that we've seen happen in the community space, especially, is there's every developer community has 3 or 4 different places where there's activity where they live. That could be Twitter, that could be a Discord, a Slack, a Discourse, so many different places. So what Orbit does is it plugs into all those different places, tries to bring the most important activity into one dashboard or single pane of glass that the community manager or the developer advocate can use to know who's in my community, who's doing the really cool stuff, who should I be reaching out to, who should I be rewarding, thanking, showing gratitude for. So it just brings all that into one place and with an interface. And I'd say that's the gist.
That's awesome. Cool. Yeah. One brief note before I forget. That KCA came into the chat to say, just want to say thank you for reveal-hugo, Josh. You've got some project users already dropping in. Say hi.
Yay. You're very welcome. Thank you for being the user.
So yeah, that's a very a super accessible introduction to Orbit and what the app is. One of the interesting things about Orbit versus I guess rolling your own dashboards and pulling your own stats from anything from those platforms is that it's also backed by this model that you've built out, the Orbit model, that kind of puts those numbers in context, I guess I would say. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how that's reflected in the app?
Yeah, the underlying philosophy is something we call the Orbit model. It's an open source project and set of documentation on GitHub, so be happy to point you in the right direction, or that Joe can be right on that. There's a graphic there at the top that I think will explain quite a bit, and you might recognize the color scheme. So I created the Orbit model when I was working at Keen.io and really developed it at Algolia. And the basic idea is that a community shouldn't be seen as a kind of funnel where you just put a bunch of people on top and then whoever lasts at the end are the people that you work with. What happens in community building is that sometimes people go away for a while, sometimes they come back, sometimes they get active really quickly. So it's not just a one directional linear binary kind of thing. The funnel is more binary. You're either in or you're out. So the Orbit model is a set of concentric circles. Everybody goes in one of 4 levels. That's our advocates, participants, contributors, observers. And based on this level, it gives you an idea of what should I be doing with this person? How are we creating value for them? What do they want from us? And so, instead of having 4 levels of funnel, it's 4 concentric circles around a big sun at the center of the solar system. And that's the DevRel team or the company.
Nice, that's awesome. And one of the things I really love about the Orbit model is the concept of love, which I know there's a what's what I'm looking for. I can't remember what the word I'm looking for is. There is currently a process underway where you're getting feedback on the model and changing the variables. And I know there's been discussion about the word love in particular, but the underlying that measure. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, it's good to say. Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. We had a lovely request for comments that where we got comments. That's the best thing. That's what you want. That's why you make the request. We had really a lot of community members chime in with opinions around how do we calculate love, and because for us, love is the measure in the Orbit model of the community members' engagement, participation. How into this are they? Are they drifting away? Okay, that means their love number is decreasing. Are they ramping up? That means it's increasing. So we try to measure that. We try to put a number around that. And the way that that's calculated is a little bit of algebra that factors in how long it's been since their last activity, how many activities they did this month, 3 months ago, last month. But that way, you as a community manager can just sort your community by the love, and then you can see who's at the top, maybe who used to be at the top. Maybe I should reach out to them because they're not at the top anymore. And so getting that formula right, it's something that's going to take a little bit of time. And every community has different levers that they're able to turn because some communities are so active that doing one thing a day doesn't even put you at the top of the community. Other communities doing one thing a day, you'd be like, you're basically a maintainer or a core team at that point. So getting the adjustments and the knobs and the dials right is going to be part of the fun.
Yeah. Hey, Daniel, thanks for joining us. One of our earlier show guests, Daniel Fury. You can find that recording on our video page. So yeah, you mentioned like frequency of activity there. I think the other big thing that I really have enjoyed about, or model in particular love, is the concept of activities and looking at the possible activities in your project and in your community and weighting them. Which I don't know how like other people who use Orbit have gone about doing that, but I've like seen weighting as like a really great opportunity to kind of factor in the like activation cost of that activity. Like you give a really good example in the docs, I think, about like, oh, hey, starring a repo is like a really low weight activity. That's a really easy thing that anyone can do. But obviously making a pull request is a significantly like higher energy activity. And so when you have that built into the love equation, you start to be able to see like, oh, this member has a high love score because they're doing like loads of little things really proactively all the time, versus like, oh, we can count on this other user to do like really heavy hitting work, but maybe on a less frequent time period. It really gives you just a fantastic view of like what you can expect from each user and the types of activities they're willing to do, which has been really useful.
Yeah, that's part of the goal, rather than it just being a number. I think over time, love, or that kind of section of the model, can evolve so that you can really see at a glance, what's the appropriate. We talk about the appropriate action or the appropriate response, like what, because a lot of times that's what you need to go and search and Google around for, or try to see like what they've done. And so today we kind of bring love down to a number, and that makes it easy to do a lot of things like sort or filter, things like that. But in the future, it might be a little bit more nuanced, so we can really say, this person has opened 3 issues and has commented on issues that other people have opened, trying to help them. Maybe this next pull request opportunity, this is a great person to reach out for that. Because, definitely.
This is slightly, are you okay?
Yes. Give me just 1 second.
No worries. Hey, Eddie, thanks for coming by. Eddie, and we've got all the past guests in the chat today. You okay?
Yes, just had to prevent something from going to sleep. Not a person, a piece of electronics.
I was wondering if it was a baby. So, God, now I need to think whether good.
Where were we? Sorry about that.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that I'm tempted to jump off into here, but I think it'd be a good time to do a demo of the app. But just to put a mental bookmark down, what I really think, one of the really interesting things I want to talk to you about, I guess from a more of a, I guess like starting a new venture thing, is like, the Orbit model came first, which before like the product was built, which is really interesting. There's obviously practical things about that. Like it's far easier to, throw up a model on a GitHub on a blog than it is to launch a product. But I also think it's really interesting as like the Orbit as an app isn't just like, hey, this is like your new CRM, throw this into your existing workflow. Like because of love and because of the model beneath it, it is like also a like holistic view of like how you manage your community. And so that like model being available is like almost like a free trial, but also allows people to mess with it and start applying it without having to buy into the app, but then also acts as a North Star for the app itself. That as you change the model, that would inform the functionality. So I want to talk about that kind of like, I just think it's a fascinating way to develop a product. But before that, let's show people what Orbit is, I think would make sense. Do you want to show a quick demo?
Yeah, definitely. We can do a little demo. Let me share my screen. Find the right tab here. Okay.
Cool.
So we have...
There we go. I'll throw that up.
And once that's up here, okay, great. So we're inside of Orbit now. We're inside of a workspace called DynoBase for a fake open source project called DynoBase. If there is an open source project called DynoBase, I'm sorry. I'm not going to do that. It's just a name. We have a feature in every Orbit workspace. You can just add test data to it, populate it with fake data. So none of the names or the people that you're seeing in this demo are actually real. This is all generated. And if you have an Orbit workspace, you can do that. So the main tabs in the Orbit application are the dashboard for our workspace. And a workspace is like a community. So for each different community you have, you might set up a different workspace. That just helps us group teams and permissions and things like that. So we have our workspace homepage that tells us
I'm appreciating that note under that person that they went live on our stream. Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah. Look at this. Let's see. So if we're looking at the middle of the screen, we see an activity feed here, and this is going to contain the things that this person has done in the community across a bunch of different channels.
Amazing.
So if I scroll to the bottom, and who we have here, Edith, boy, it's not a real person, so if I don't pronounce it right, I don't feel too bad. But I think it's Edith Conroy.
Yeah, it looks like an Edith.
This data is, I have to give a shout out to the Ruby gem, or I think it's a collection of software across a couple different programming languages, but it's called Faker, Faker, and it's fantastic for generating test data like this. Highly recommend that project anytime you need test data. That's where this comes from. I don't actually write these things like you can't connect the alarm without indexing the 1080p TCP alarm. I would say 720. But so here's our activity feed. We can see what this person has been doing across GitHub, across Twitter. Orbit has integrations today for Twitter and GitHub that go to a GitHub org or a Twitter handle and look at the pull requests or issues, or if it's on the Twitter side, then it's mentions. And tries to just give one feed there. If we look at the details tab, we can see more information about this person's membership, when they, what's the anniversary of their community, when did they join, how many activities they've done. We can add some tags if we want. We can say, do that.
Nice.
And then if we go back to our members table, which go to it, it shows us all the different members in our workspace, in our community. And here I was mentioning you can sort by love kind of in the model, where you can do that in the product too. So we can see here that Cindy is the highest love member, and that his or her love or their love has been like trending slightly up over the past couple of months. So that's what we call the love line. And that's what tells you, what's the nature of this person's participation? How's that changing over time? And we can get a bunch of other attributes. We can sort, we can filter, we can get reports, and we can get a global activity timeline of what's happening let's see. Here we go. So here's a report of the members by the orbit level. Going back to the orbit model and what Joe said, the orbit model is heavily influential in the way that we're designing the orbit application. So concepts like love, reach, orbit level, those are all in here. And so if we take the sum of the love of all of our members in a given month, we get a number from that, and we can look at that number over time to see, is the amount of love in the community changing.
Yeah, which is awesome. So the numbers, 1 is the highest, right? Or 4,
right, yeah. Yeah, we should get some labels in here pretty soon.
I had to quickly open the model.
And we just changed the names of the orbit levels, which was another thing that we're working on with the community. One of the goals we have for the orbit model is that it's not just for developer communities or product-centric communities, which a lot of the early users are DevRel teams or developer advocates who work for companies. But we really think that the metaphor of orbit versus funnel, the difference there can apply to a lot of communities over time. And so we wanted to create names for the orbit levels that we thought would work pretty well across a lot of different types of communities. So if you see the GitHub repository, thankfully, I think those are updated now, and you can see what those are.
Advocates, contributors, participants, observers.
Those are the 4. Yeah.
Cool. Nice. That pretty.
And that's from 1 to 4. So we 1 is the innermost, because you can't subtract more from that. If 4 is the innermost, then what's to stop someone from adding a 5? They could also add 5 in the other way. See if someday there's 5 orbit levels. Maybe that's okay. We also say be flexible. If the labels that are in the documentation don't work for a particular community, we just say come up with your own labels. If you need more than 4 levels, that's totally fine. The product might not be super flexible yet to support that. You can absolutely do that in your own reporting or your own things like that. So every community
that also kind of gets onto like some of the utilities you add around, where like you have an Airtable that implements the orbit model, for example. So that would be like you offer tools to people who do want to be so far ahead that the product isn't there yet.
Cool.
There was something I was about to say about the orbit levels. One thing I think that's really interesting about the orbit levels and the renaming of them is the observer, participants, contributors, to what you were saying about like matching more communities, is those 3 levels in particular, like really, there's that like common thing about online communities, that like 90% of the people are will just observe, 9% will interact, and 1% will create the content, and it like very perfectly maps to that. So I can definitely see how this will be useful, especially with the I think when you get to advocates, and we saw it in the product a little bit there, you said someone was a member of a champions program. Like champions programs are really big in the developer world, but like are also huge in like conventional products like street teams and all these kind of things. So I can definitely just, yeah, it makes perfect sense this would be applicable to non-developer categories. So yeah, to kind of bring it back to that ramble and that question I had before, like, so I know when you were, Orbit came out of something that you were doing, I believe it was with Patrick before, right? Where you were helping companies with, I think at the time you called it like community apps or community or community products.
Yeah, community projects.
Community projects,
yeah, community projects. Yeah, so the things that like an example of a community project would be Doc Search from Algolia, which powers the documentation search. So it's something that the company builds and gives away to the developer community for free, just as a way to add value to the community, and sure, in return, build some awareness.
Yeah.
So we're kind of trying to do that as a service with a 2-person team.
Yeah. So at what point where did Orbit come from? Was that like, was this model, I guess, like something that you were evolving in that service as like a methodology for working and it kind of grew out of control? Or was this like a proactive effort to put a formula on some of the things you were observing as people working in community? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. The big leap from just using the model in a kind of, I guess, theoretical or consulting context. The big leap from that to knowing that we wanted to build a product was just that it was very hard for companies, for our clients, to implement the recommendations that we would give them. We would sit down, we would go over the Orbit model. Usually the reaction would be very positive, like, oh, this is how we should think about our community. This works so much better. We've been, now we have a framework. We know that we need advocates. We know that we need participants, contributors. And then the question is, what next? Do you have a system to track this? And the answer of, well, we have an Airtable, we have spreadsheets, we can show you how to get that set up. We did that and it was okay, but we knew that to, for more than like 1 or 2 companies at a time to be able to benefit from that, some tooling made a lot of sense. And there's just a lot of complexity in there too. As soon as your community gets a little more multifaceted, that Airtable template, you can start to see that it doesn't handle for things like merging members who come from different platforms. Like, is this the same person on GitHub and Twitter? So what we just try to do in the app is take a lot of that work away, that like 10% that ends up being the 50% or the 90% sometimes. But so that was really the leap, just saying we feel like the idea is sound and is resonating with people, but in order to put that into practice, a lot of tooling needs to exist. And then the other side of that is just knowing that the tooling for community managers and advocates is so nascent. There's a lot of community platforms out there, and it's wonderful to see in 2020 that there's even more coming on the market. The front, we call the community front end, or where the members and everyone are interacting. But if you think about the marketing and sales worlds, they're extremely mature in terms of tooling. But community is not. And so that also led us to say, well, we should really build some tooling for people in this space, because it's so important and there's such an opportunity to make jobs and lives better.
Yeah, for sure. And I think an example of that, which I point to a lot, is the fact that like Discord, which is a community platform, has only just now added insights after like so many years of its existence. You just couldn't actually tell anything about you would have to install a bot and scrape the data to find out anything about the activity levels of your members. So that like tooling has very much always been a second place citizen in community world. So yeah, that's part of why I'm very excited about Orbit. So I don't think we've got any, if anyone's got any questions about Orbit, please do throw them in. We're probably going to move on to reveal-hugo in a moment, but don't feel like you've missed the opportunity. Someone did ask how to become an advocate in Orbit, which I guess they were talking about the model, but we could also mention the fact that you are currently hiring a developer advocate. And that is up. We've spoken about DevRel a lot on this show and explained DevRel to folks, because one of the things we're trying to do is show folks the many different career paths that you can go with your technical skills, and it's not just software engineering, and there's program management, all these kind of things. So if you've been inspired by that, you can probably find that on the Orbit website. So is there anything else you want to throw in about Orbit before we move on to talking about your project?
No, I think that's most of it. I will say we're in early access, so today. You cannot go to orbit.love, our domain, and sign up directly. However, fill out the little early access form on there, and if you send me a note, josh@orbit.love, just ping me and tell me you're a listener here on the show, and be very, very happy to get your feedback and add you to the system. If you have even a small open source project, or a big one, or you have a community in some other location, it might be something that you can get some value out of. And so, yeah.
I use it in an open source project that I work on, that Marcin in the chat, who's coming on with us next week, maintains. And it's just like amazing, some of the things that are super useful. One of the things we'll be talking about with Marcin next week is this was an open source project that basically moved to a new code base. So they changed stack. And so there was a transition, well, there still is a transition period between that old project and the new project. And being able to see how the community is dealing with that transition in the Orbit data has been fascinating. And
very cool.
It's like one of the things where like I had suspicions and hypothesis about like how the community were dealing with it, but like you can literally see like the effect of our messaging. There's like a spike in issues when that change starts to happen, as people are confused about like, hey, there's more bugs now because obviously you're not focusing on that old version anymore. And then you suddenly see those issues fall off when we start telling people like, yes, we're not doing this anymore. Please go to the new project. And it's like really nice to actually see your efforts play out in data. It's super cool. So yeah, let's go on to your reveal-hugo project. So as I said, this is, we're going to change tact and go for maintainer show and tell. So Josh is going to run us through a project that he maintains, which we've already got some users of in the chat. Thank you for joining us. So the project is called reveal-hugo. I'll throw that link in. For folks who have never encountered either of these words, what is this portmanteau? What is this project name telling us?
All in the name. Reveal, a very, very literal name. Reveal is a nod to the reveal.js framework for making HTML and CSS presentations, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So that's we love about reveal.js is instead of writing your slides in Keynote or PowerPoint or something that is not versionable, you can't really check into Git. Reveal.js is just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So and a pretty, a really nice interface around it. I would say you don't have to be an expert by any means in any of those technologies to use reveal.js or reveal-hugo. If you can use Markdown, you can create slides. And part of the inspiration for me to create reveal-hugo was just seeing that, Hugo works really well with Markdown, and this HTML that's being generated from the Markdown seems like it would fit perfectly into a reveal.js slide. And that's kind of when the idea was born. I had been using reveal.js for a long time and making a lot of presentations with it, but I never felt like I had a good boilerplate or starter kit for it. And I'd been getting into Hugo at the time, found it was really fast, really easy, and I just wanted to marry those two things together. I guess this is when we were doing some of that consulting work, hence the need to do lots of presentations and the desire for crazy rebuilding speed of the presentation. Which is what Hugo gives us.
Awesome, very cool. No problem, Tishwari. We had someone drop in the chat saying Python, 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 Python. I'm afraid there's no Python here on the show today.
No, I'm afraid not.
I don't know if we've got any Python before we end now. I'll have a look. But yeah, I don't think we've got any Python coming up. Maybe with Wilhelm next week. Cool. So do you want to do a screen share and show us a reveal presentation and how that like looks?
Yeah, I'd love to.
Cool. PHP, we've had a lot of PHP lost algorithm. We've had, I think you might have missed the zenith of our PHP guests because we had a heap on this last week. Today, we're going to be doing lots of Go and Ruby. Actually, Stefan Young. Let me check what Stefan Young is working in later on. We've got some Scala next week. Let me throw that up. So this is a reveal project. It's just from the reveal-hugo site, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's reveal-hugo.jello.com.dzello.com. Might be on the next slide. The documentation is a presentation built with reveal-hugo itself. And so
beautiful.
you can look at all the markdown and the code and everything behind this presentation. And it's a bit of a kitchen sink. I'm not going to drain through the presentation. You can definitely see that, or you can go and do that on your own. But as I go through it, you're here. You're getting to see what reveal-hugo does. You're going to see some markdown and things like that. Get into the configuration. But as we go further and further, it's like each little different way to use this, or each thing that you might want to do, like animations or transitions. Yeah, there we go. We have fragment animation here. So as you go deeper into the presentation, you'll just see more and more ways we can do vertical slides, which is kind of a nice feature of reveal.js that we plug into. So we can go left to right. We can also go up and down and do different backgrounds.
Nice.
Yeah,
Like non-linear traversing, like being able to go like 2 on 2 axes is really interesting, and obviously something that you don't get in like PowerPoint and Keynote.
It's really good for I think for the audience, but also as a person giving the presentation, as the speaker, it's really helpful to know, okay, we're diving into this part, and at some point I've got to get back up there. I've got to get right.
Fascinating.
So
super
yeah,
cool.
I can share. Let me pop that off, and then very quickly I can pop over to the GitHub repository.
So welcome, Shreyas. We're looking at reveal-hugo. Reveal is a framework for creating presentations in JavaScript, and Hugo is a static site generator, which I will make Josh tell us about in a moment.
Yeah, I guess we kind of jumped into the reveal-hugo and didn't talk quite as much about Hugo.
Why Hugo in particular,
And there we go, if we can see that.
Yeah, we can.
Great. Yeah, so Hugo is a static site generator. It's written in Go, but the way that you interface with it is Markdown, HTML, a template, sometimes Go templates, which is a little bit of a learning curve to it, but overall not too bad. And the best feature of reveal-hugo is that even if your site has 100, let's say you have a blog and that's hosted on Hugo, and that blog has 100 articles or even 1,000, to rebuild that entire blog might be a few hundred milliseconds, or like 2 or 3. So there's like different levels of performance when it comes to rebuilding things. And sometimes we say something rebuilds really fast, and we mean like, oh, 1 second, 2 seconds, sometimes a few hundred milliseconds. Hugo is so fast, you basically just don't realize that anything is even happening. It's wonderful for developing or building anything on a train, or when your laptop isn't plugged in, because it uses no battery. It's just so efficient. So
that's such a developer advocate like thing to enjoy.
Yeah, I'm like, if I fire up, like I'm a huge fan of bigger frameworks that are more JavaScript centric too, like Gatsby or Next.js. But if I'm on my laptop without a battery and I need to be regenerating a page or a site over and over again, that battery is going to go down. With Hugo, it's like playing an MP3. It's really barely notices. Hugo is really great for that, and it's very, very simple. You don't need to learn Hugo. You don't need to understand build pipelines or something like Webpack or JavaScript. It literally just takes HTML, takes your Markdown, turns it into HTML. It's pretty easy to see how that happens. And so, and I think that the project has gotten more beginner friendly over the years. There were a few parts that were pretty challenging to figure out in the beginning, but I think it's gotten better. The community is amazing. So big fan of Hugo overall for when you just need to set up a simple website and you don't need a fancy build pipeline. Hugo is just a really elegant way to do that.
That's really good to hear. That's one of the reasons why I think I've clung to Jekyll for as long as I have, is that like I looked at Gatsby and some of the newer static site generators, and it just adds like, so much that I don't have to care about with Jekyll. So you mentioned Go templating. So one of the things we've had a conversation a couple of times now about Liquid, the templating language for Jekyll on this show, and how for templating, how it manages to kind of maintain the simplicity of a templating language, but still being pretty powerful. So you mentioned Go templating, and I'm guessing this is Hugo's Liquid equivalent and lets us, do fancy things with the static site. Okay, cool.
Yeah, and Go, I think
I'm looking for the
it's safe to say this, but the Go templating is kind of built into the Go language itself. Because Liquid is an extension or a library that you can bring in Go templating. So anyone coming from the Go world it's probably second nature. But the nice thing, part of the secret to the speed of Hugo is that it's Yeah, it's not, it's using this templating library that's already very, very well optimized inside of Go itself.
That's fascinating, having the templating language built in. I've found the docs for it. It is built in. That's really cool.
Great. Yeah, I wonder if there's any.
And it looks very liquidy as well.
Yeah, that part is nice. If you're, it's not something that's going to look totally different than what you've done before. It's mostly just a few things, picking up a few things. But once you get the hang of it, it's really good.
Awesome. So this might be a really dumb question, but what is the process of like building a static site generator into Reveal? Like, what is it that makes, you know, reveal-hugo a thing other than just using Reveal? Does that make sense?
Yeah, good question. One of the very simple things, excuse me, is that when you, at least the way it was before, I think it's still true with reveal.js, you don't need a web server or anything like that to run it. When you download it, I think if you double click on the file that you get when you download, it's just a file : //URL, and that's that prevents a couple of things from working the way that you would want them to sometimes, like relative paths, and it just makes it a little bit harder to create a project where everyone knows that, oh, here's just the npm start style command that I can do to bring it up. So that's one thing that Hugo brings is just that underlying foundation. So you know, okay, this is how I start the Reveal project. This is how I compile it, and that's how all that works. Right. And then one thing that that worked well between the two projects is that we can let's see, how is that working? The way the type of HTML markdown that reveal.js or markup that reveal.js needs to work was just something that's really easy for Hugo to produce. It's basically just a list of HTML blocks, and each HTML block represents one slide. And so when I was looking at that, I could see that it would be just really easy to take a small snippet of markdown and use Hugo to turn that into HTML. That's just something that it's very easy to do. And then some of the design questions came, like, should we have one markdown file per slide, or should we have one markdown file per section, or one markdown file for the whole thing? And what I settled on was that people would want to do it a bunch of different ways. And so you could actually, you can split up the presentation into as many markdown files as you want. And it was easy to use Hugo to stitch those back together. Nice. So if you have a really text-heavy presentation, for whatever reason, maybe it's something designed to read, then you could maybe have a couple of slides per markdown file. Otherwise, if it's just like small bullet points, you can have others. You could do it a different way.
Is this the in the Hugo repository, is the example site the website you just showed us?
Let's see. Yes, it is.
Awesome. Cool. Can we dive into that and look a little bit how that works?
Yeah, if we look at the content, this is where the good stuff is. There's actually multiple example sites. Home is the one that we see on the website of the one we were going through. There's also 8 or 9 other presentations here that are standalone presentations that show a different feature in reveal-hugo. So there's multiple ways to highlight code, for example. One uses pigments, another one uses some built-in Hugo highlighting. So we tried to create an example for each case. But home is like the kitchen sink presentation. Right. And so if we go in here and we go into features and we look at the raw markdown, which would be a little easier.
Is that weight, that's for font weight, I'm guessing?
Oh, let's see here. Oh, ordering, actually.
Oh, ordering, cool, okay.
So yeah, if we have our presentation in 5 different files, then you don't want to rely just on the alphabetical names or the dates of those files. So we can be explicit in what's called the front matter at the top of the file. So
it's like YAML front matter in Jekyll. So I'm guessing front +++ is just like the alternative, the way of marking out front matter in Hugo.
Yeah, it's the default, which is a library called TOML, which came from GitHub, came from Tom Preston Warner, I think.
Huh. I love that, like, YAML front matter is done with hyphens or minuses, and so Toml uses a plus. That's
So feels so contrarian right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you KCA from the comments. You can also use YAML in the front matter, and there's one other option too, I think, but yes,
Probably Jason.
Jason, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, choose your own adventure. If you want to be one way or the other. I think most of the examples in the site are Toml, just to try to follow the lead on what Hugo does. But the nice thing is that they're all pretty similar, and so it's just some quirks and some tweaks about how the different sections are nested that has to be worried about.
Cool.
But yeah, that's I'm trying to find one. There was only one slide on that one. Let me see. I think this one should be more fun. This is how we're creating the vertical display. I can beef up the font there a little bit. So the vertical section. So we have a short code in Hugo, which is like a macro or a shortcut. It basically allows you to do some processing on what comes between. In the Go templating language, these are the delimiters. So that's what tells you it's a block that needs to be looked at. And this is Markdown. So this is going to create an H2 header for our section. We separate the slides just with 3 dashes. So this is how we're putting multiple slides in one Markdown file. Cool. And then we end our section here. And that's how we've made this entire part of the presentation vertical instead of horizontal. And that's all you have to do. If we deleted the section at the top and the bottom, then you just have horizontal slides here.
Right.
So that's all it takes.
So this might be I don't know if you've got an example of this. This might be a stupid question. One of the things I have struggled with in the past with using like code-driven presentation engines is like positioning of the images, because it's like a nightmare that I don't really want to get into when I'm like trying to put an image somewhere in particular, having to get into the funs and joys of CSS centering. Does Reveal, or in particular like the Hugo version of Reveal, offer any? Do you have any good examples of dealing with that? Like, is this a problem that actually exists, or have I really overinflated this in my head?
No, if anything, you've underinflated it.
Okay, cool.
I think that kind of placement continues to be very, very challenging. I think I don't know the full history there, but I know slides.com is a site created by the reveal.js maintainer, and a lot of what's available on there is a kind of drag and drop editing. And from the code that I've seen, I believe that knows how to absolutely position images inside of the underlying presentation. So
interesting.
It's not, we don't have specific support for making that a lot easier in reveal-hugo. That would be a cool thing to add.
Throwing in your own CSS and wherever in the slide.
We have a couple of examples of putting slides side by side, and or putting images side by side. And there's also a concept in reveal-hugo called templates. So when I've had to do this before, we have reusable slides and sections. We can put these in kind of a global file in the Hugo project and then refer to them later on. And what I've used that to do before is get some kind of image arranging to work well for one slide. And then across all my presentations, I can just keep using that. So
cool.
In the future,
is basically the same as how I work with Keynote. Like I have a template for how I want my images positioned. I never actually, spoke do that. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, templates are the key here. But that would be a really great feature to add, because I think that's one of the most common things that people run into, and it'd be really nice to just say, I want this image to be half-sized and over here, and maybe introduce some CSS framework that people enough people are familiar with, or something. So if anyone's listening out there, we're open to people contributing to the project for sure, and this could be a fun area.
Yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about contributing? I also had another question. I saw there was a forestry directory, but that might be way off track. But I looked up forestry and I'm now very interested in that. But I guess we should talk about contributing first, because it's slightly more relevant.
we can do that. Yeah, forestry is great. That allows you to edit these in a browser. Forestry is a headless CMS, so that's that little forestry directory in the project. That's what that is, and that's
awesome.
A really lovely team. So don't hesitate to check them out.
Cool. So yeah, in terms of contributing, What
Yeah,
is that? So I see you've got lots of open issues. Like where we have a contributing MD, always a good sign.
we do. Yeah, this has some basic examples just on how to get the site up and running and how to
Great.
build.
Yeah.
And a little bit of instruction. So we do not have tests for Reveal
Great.
Hugo. That is not
Yeah,
to say
like how
it's
20 minutes.
untested. It's that
Great.
it's unautomatically tested. The test
Great.
is really open up the kitchen sink presentation and flip through all of the slides. And if you haven't broken anything, it's good.
Great.
We'll
Yeah.
merge it.
Yeah.
So there's no tests, but yeah, just go add it to the, if you add a feature, add it to the kitchen sink presentation. If it still
Yeah.
works, then great. And as far as, skills and knowledge, again, I think HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and just a little bit of interest in learning Hugo, which does not require you to learn Go. If at most you'd have to look at some of the Go templates, but you could really if you just knew Reveal.js and you just wanted to take something that you loved from the Reveal ecosystem and add it to Reveal Hugo, that's probably not all that complicated. That doesn't require getting into the internals of Hugo or anything.
Yeah.
And if it does, then I'm here to help that process.
Nice, that's awesome. And one of the common questions we get for projects at the moment, especially on this show right now, is if folks do contribute to this project during the month of October, what's the best way for them to get the Hacktoberfest label added to their pull request? I guess just get the PR.
Yes, I think that would be. I think that would be the best way. Awesome. We don't have too much volume, so I can process that and add that label.
Awesome. Cool. So you go on the other. Have you looked? So just think on that testing thing, like the idea of testing a slide framework is nonsense. Have you looked at like the visual testing tools like Percy or anything in the past? This is purely like just out of interest. I have no idea how this would work.
I'm familiar with them, but I've never been. I think a lot of the times if I use a technology somewhere, it's because I used it somewhere else, and it seems really easy to just bring over. I don't have a lot of experience with like a visual testing framework, so it'd be a really fun exercise to try to learn that kind of a framework and then adopt it into Reveal Hugo. But right now, it is just the purely human test, purely human testing there.
Yeah, I have like no idea how visual testing works. If anyone in the chat knows a lot about visual testing and would like to come on the show and talk about visual testing, let us know. I think that would be a great episode. I just looked up Storybook uses something called Chromatic, which looks interesting as well. Cool. Awesome. Rad. Well, that was all. If anyone has any questions, you have a couple of minutes to throw them in the chat or forever be at peace. Is there anything else that you wanted to chat about that we haven't covered today, or anything else you wanted to throw out in the world or push?
I feel like we've gotten a lot of stuff out there. I think Joe, I think you mentioned that Orbit is hiring, so we are hiring. You can go to orbit.love/careers, and you can see the positions we have open both on the engineering side and on the advocacy side. And always just give that a plug if you're passionate about sort of building the future of community and tools for community builders. Then that's the right. You'll be in good company, I would say. Otherwise, I'm very happy to answer, any questions that anyone has, whether that's about the advocacy, the Orbit model, open source presentation, starting a company in the DevRel space. So that's not particularly a well-worn path yet. I'm hoping that becomes more of a thing.
It's definitely getting there. I'm hearing
there's more. It's really encouraging.
Yeah. It's supporting people building things hopefully is a profitable endeavor. We've got a lot of convincing of the world to do that. But
I hope so. And we think the world is always changing. 2020 has accelerated that, and the way that people want to buy and experience, learn about products and services is much more community driven now. You don't really want to just like look at a web page and then get a bunch of highly targeted emails from someone that you don't actually know. Like, learning about something through community and the advocacy path is just a better way, from all of us in this space. We think it's a better way to do it. And it's also good for the business. And that's why, something we're passionate about, showing both sides. It's good for the person, for the community member having a better experience. And it's also better for the company too. Better retention and better better feedback, better product feedback.
For sure. I think we had this brief burst in our industry where everyone was obsessed with growth hacking, and I think I'm seeing a lot of just exhaustion from everyone who's been at the receiving end of that. And we're seeing a little bit of a shift now away from those tactics, which I, as a community person, am incredibly encouraged about. All about organic and, building living rooms rather than shoving a foghorn up to someone's face and screaming for it. I think COVID has definitely accelerated that with, everything now being online and that being the only way to get communication. People are really we're hearing a lot about like Zoom fatigue and mailing list fatigue, which seems like newsletters became like the content king for all of a month, and now everyone's fatigued already.
It's very true, and the way that we reach people has to always be evolving to like what they're experiencing at that moment, what they're feeling at that moment. And so things like optimize, like the growth stuff that's been very popular in the last decade, it's very centered around optimization. When you're optimizing one path, it always means you're not optimizing others. Right. And if you get really good at optimizing one thing, but then the world changes, then the local maximum you've been able to create just kind of goes out the window. And especially in this day and age where you sign up for something and you get like 10 emails within the first couple of days, or your company buys a product or something, or a service or a technology, and then all of a sudden you're getting all of these inbound communications. Like, we just don't really want to create a world where that's a little bit more opt-in, and it's a little bit more guided through that kind of process. More like, we think of, when we talk about software, we think that it's more adopted than sold now. And adoption is about the person who has the need coming forward and being curious and getting educated about that need, and eventually reaching out to other people to learn more, versus, which more traditional sales and marketing is thought about in the other direction, which is like, we are going to you. We're going to target you like crazy with ads, or we're going to literally like send people to come and contact you and do outreach. And the sales and marketing in the right context is fantastic. They're really, it's of course a critical and essential part of business, but we just believe that works really well in some contexts. And more funnel ones, and then the orbit works better in the orbit. And if you put those two together visually, you get an ice cream cone. And that's the last thing. That's the last thing I'll say.
That's amazing. That's perfect.
Because some of the ice cream is going to drip down, and it's going to go in the funnel. It's going to happen. You just have to trust it.
That's beautiful. That's that I need to include that in like some DevRel strategy report at some point.
We have like space themed ice cream cone stickers. If you want one, don't hesitate to reach out. I think they're on back order right now, but we're going to get some more. And
that's a good point. Before we lose you, you got one there. Nice. That's awesome.
Just happen to have my laptop. Yeah, there's our Orbit and funnel right there.
And the Orbit 100.
Yes.
If people want to get in touch with you and have questions, where's the best place for them to go or reach out?
You can do that on email at josh@orbit.love, and you can do that on Twitter too, at DZELLO, and maybe other places, like maybe not LinkedIn, like Twitter. Email is great.
Twitter is just LinkedIn for developers, let's be real.
Well said.
Yeah, and I guess something we didn't touch on, and again, come back to careers. You are based in Paris, and the team is like a remote-friendly team in multiple places across the world. So, which is you were kind of remote-friendly before this all kicked off. So that is like a thing the company is doing, and not a temporary thing.
Yes, that's we're very much remote-friendly. Although we hope that this changes at some point. Our CEO and our first employee have not met physically in person to this day. It's been working with us for a long time. Never really anticipated that. We had a whole trip planned, and it's been a lot of plans have changed this year, but it's really in our DNA. Yeah, my co-founder Patrick is in San Francisco, 9 hours away, so we have to learn to basically do everything in a kind of distributed async way. And we also just think there's a ton of benefit in doing that. So every role you'll see on our careers page, that's remote friendly.
Awesome. Wonderful. Cool. Well, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I will do the backstage shuffle now and do the show outro. So thank you again. And again, if you want to get hold of Josh to chat about anything we've spoken about today, you can find him here. Farewell. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Joe. Have a great day.
Alrighty, so thanks again to Josh. So just a brief recap of what we looked at. We spoke about the Orbit model and how it can be used to keep track of what's happening in your communities, whether they be developer, open source, or otherwise. He showed us the app, which is early access. You can see that request early access form on their site, orbit.love. I said I use it in some of my other work, and I'm a huge fan and think it's really both the application of the model has filled in a lot of... if any of you follow me on Twitter, you'll frequently see me joking about the fact that DevRel people still won't stop talking about how to measure success of DevRel and won't stop talking about metrics. Orbit is just my take this, go away answer to that, and I love it to pieces for that. So stay where you are, do not leave. Let me run you through the schedule and what we've got going on for the rest of the day. Oh, sorry, I completely got lost in my recap. Reveal-hugo was the second half of what we did in the show, which looks like a super useful framework for using Reveal, which is a way to make presentations in JavaScript. Josh and the other contributors to Hugo, like that KCA, thank you for dropping in the chat. The other contributors to Reveal-hugo have slammed Hugo, a Go static site generator, into Reveal to make it that little bit lovelier, a little bit easier to use. So you can find that repository at github.com at dzello reveal-hugo, and I'll throw that back in the chat as well. So don't go anywhere. Let me run you through with what's going on for us today. This is our first of 3 shows. Our last shows of the week. We don't stream over the weekend, so you really got to get in today. So first up, as I said, we stream 3 times a week, every day of the week, which is a lot of streams to keep track of. If you want notifications when we go live, you can get them right here on Twitch by following us. Click the little love heart, then click the bell. It is a 2-stage process. If you just click the love heart, you won't get notifications. So do also click the bell. We also tweet an hour before every show at RaiseDevs on Twitter, twitter.com/RaiseDevs, where you can find us regularly tweeting about our schedule. And that schedule is also on our Twitch page, twitch.tv RaiseDevs schedule. We keep that up to date. It's updated weekly because Twitch only lets you have a schedule a week at a time. But the slots, the times of the show are always the same. So although the schedule won't show you what guests we have next week, it will show you the times we are live next week. So you can go to twitch.tv RaiseDevs schedule. Over the weekend, I'll update that schedule. But let me give you a little teaser right here and now. So first of all, let's talk about what we've got going on today. So the next show is going to be with Stefan Young from Customer.io. Customer.io is a really cool, let me throw that link in. Customer.io is a really cool little tool for, copy and paste. Here we go. A really cool team, really cool product for reaching your customers in various ways, sending them emails, push notifications, that kind of thing. And we're doing... we're kind of doing the old code game, kind of not. So we have this thing where we have a guest come on and we review their old code and talk about how they would do things differently today. With Stefan, we are doing that with some code that's currently in production at Customer.io. It's an SMTP server. So that's kind of reviewing old code, but also it is it is running in use code, so that's going to be a really fun episode. And then tonight, you lose me. You don't have me as your host. You have our founder, John Britton, always very exciting. And he's going to be talking to Corey Alexander. That's a 2-parter. We're going to be starting off looking at one of Corey's old Ruby projects called Sleet. And again, that's the old code game. What was Sleet? Why isn't it maintained anymore? What would Corey do differently today? And then that's going to flip over to a new project he's working on, which is a really interesting story. It was something he built that was originally in Bash, and then he learned Rust and ported it to Rust. So really excited about that. No problem, Shreyas. I hope we see you next week. But I understand that it's a big schedule, and it's a schedule that ranges over 12 hours, so it's hard to be at both the the first and the end shows, especially for me. Marcin already subscribed and clicked the bell, but can't find the like button. I don't think. Wait, you subscribed? You do have a subscription. I don't know. So there's not a like button. There's a follow button, and then the notification button, and then there's subscriptions, which are a separate thing. Almost everyone on this channel has a subscription at some point because during our episode of Matt last week, everyone went wild and bought gift subscriptions for everyone. So literally everyone in the chat has subscriptions if you've been here before. Yeah, so Kushal's got given one. So I think if you're subscribed, Kushal, you lose the ability to follow because follow's kind of in subscription. I'm unsure how it works. You'll probably get the option to follow back when your subscription expires. So keep an eye out for that. So that's our schedule for today. So as I said, later on, you've got John Britton our founder, who will be hosting Corey Alexander. Coming around to Monday, so next week, into our teasers for next week. Our first show of the day is Tanya Aller. Tanya is developer advocate at Microsoft. Then we've got Ian Jennings. Ian Jennings works in developer experience, so trying to help companies make a better experience for developers using their products. He does some really cool things, and he has particularly like a prototype he's built that they use internally at his company, which is super exciting, and I hope we get to talk about it. We have Michelle Mannering, who is GitHub. She's based in Australia. So actually, I need to check what time this show is for Michelle, because I've got a feeling that's a really punishing time. But Michelle's awesome. She does a lot of streaming. So I'm excited to chat to her. Tuesday, we have Prince Wilson. I don't know if any of the corgis are here. I was just shit posting. Shouldn't have expected anything else, should I really, Martin? Tuesday we've got Prince Wilson. Prince is amazing. I always forget where Prince is now. I'm going to go look this up. But that'll be a wonderful show. He's just like the purest, nicest human being. Then we have Nick Taylor. So that's the Dev2 takeover. New seller. Cool. And Prince is also an instructor at Egghead. So he does a lot of educational work. He used to work at the Flatiron School. He was a teacher and a curriculum developer at one of the boot camps. Hey, X-Whale Up, you've just caught the end of the show. We're finishing up soon. I'm just telling people what's coming up in our schedule for next week. So yeah, Tuesday, the midday show is Nick Taylor, the Dev2 takeover. That's when the amazing folks from Dev2, the developer community, take over this show. It becomes their show for 90 minutes, and they work on Forum, the open source platform that powers Dev2, and they fix issues. They get into certain topics. They usually try and do a certain topic per show. So last week we looked at liquid tags. The week before that we looked at accessibility. I don't know what they're doing on the next one of the show, but Nick will be driving that. He's a developer there at Dev2, and they'll be working on a large Ruby on Rails code base and live coding on that. It's always super fun. The last show next Tuesday is with Marcin, the person shitposting in my chat right now. We will be talking about Enzo, which is a visual language written in Scala and Rust compiled to WebAssembly. That's the project that I mentioned had been through like a big change from one code base to another. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the challenges of that, why that rewrite happened, and getting into the compiler. Marcin works on the engine team, so the actual like compilery end, and right now is writing the standard library, which is fascinating. Has anyone ever written a standard library for a programming language? I bet you haven't. I'm very interested in the challenges of doing that. Oh, and also we're going to talk about Truffle. Truffle is something that I understand is very exciting, mainly because every week I see Marcin exploding about some Truffle feature. So we're going to talk about Truffle. It's part of GraalVM, and it makes interoperation between other languages very, very easy. So we're going to be talking about that. Wednesday, we have Matt Cowley back again. Matt Cowley is the community platform manager at DigitalOcean. If you are in the Hacktoberfest Discord, you obviously know Matt. Matt has been the one maintaining the Hacktoberfest app and making those rapid changes this Hacktoberfest as they deal with like the problems that came up around spam. We spoke to him last Wednesday about Hacktoberfest. This Wednesday, we're going to talk about his other job, CDN.js. It's a CDN that powers a good proportion of the web and helps people's JavaScript get into apps, I guess. He maintains that, so we're going to talk about CDN.js on Wednesday. We've got Wilhelm Klopp back on Wednesday as well. Wilhelm is an independent businessman that's such a stupid way of saying that. Wilhelm runs a software company in London. He used to work with myself and John at GitHub, and then he had this app, which if you use Slack, you've probably encountered, called Simple Poll, and Simple Poll grew and grew and grew until it became its own business. And so now Wilhelm he works on Simple Poll full time, and he's hired a team to work on Simple Poll and the other products full time. He's been on the show with us a couple of times before, where we've spoken about that journey. I'm going to continue picking his brains about running independent software businesses this Wednesday. I particularly want to talk to him this Wednesday about creating new products. So part of his drive to taking Simple Poll out as its own company was to create other products. And since then, he's launched 3 new products. So I want to talk to him about his process around doing that, how he thinks about new products, how he comes up with new products, and how he launches new products. So we're going to be doing that on Wednesday. Then we've got Angel Rivera, who's at Circle CI. That is our show all about continuous integration. So if you have seen all the wonderful pipelines that people are running on open source projects on the show, and you're like, how do I do CI? Why should I do CI? What options are available for me to CI? That's the show next Wednesday. Thursday, we have Guan Luca from Equinix Metal. If you liked our show with Rain 2 weeks ago, you'll like this one. Guan Luca is one of Rain's colleagues. Then we have Nathaniel from Twilio. Nathaniel is, again, another awesome human being. He's a Twilio developer advocate in London. He will be joining us on Thursday. Sam Lanning, they another ex-GitHubber. Sam Lanning worked at Semel, which is like a security code-based analysis product that got acquired by GitHub, but now Sam works at the UN, which is very interesting, and I'm excited to hear what that entails. So Sam's going to be on the show Thursday, our last show on Thursday next week, and then into the final day of our Hacktoberfest show, we have Nicholas Carrigan Friday morning. Nicholas is a regular here in the chat. He's a software developer at AVG, the antivirus company. And Nicholas is going to be coming hang out with us on Friday morning. We have Eddie, who was in the chat. I imagine he's gone to his own stream now. Eddie is a open source advocate, by which he spends full time helping people get into open source, talking about open source, showing new ways to get into open source. He runs an awesome YouTube channel, and he was our first guest on this show. He's been very busy during Hacktoberfest, so we're going to catch up with him at the end of Hacktoberfest and talk a little bit about what he's been up to, how Hacktoberfest has been for him, that kind of stuff. And then our very last show is with our own Chris Ewald. Chris is a coach and an engineer here at Raise. He's been at Raise since the beginning. If you watched any of the show with our alumni, Ching Ching, Sukrit, or Frida, you would have heard about Chris and his pair programming and his coaching and what he's taught people. We're going to be asking Chris all about that on his last show with us on Friday. And I believe we're also going to look at Raise.dev way back when during the pilot program. Raise.dev built the current iteration of the Hacktoberfest site with DigitalOcean, and Chris was lead on that project, helping the Raise.dev participants at the time build that project out. So I think we're also going to dive into the Hacktoberfest code base again, which would be a lovely way to end Hacktoberfest, wouldn't it? So that's it for our planned schedule. We do have one thing potentially coming up on the 31st of October. So if you're interested in this, we don't know if we're doing this yet, because I want to make sure we've got enough interest. Our plan is we're going to flip the script. And on the 31st of October, we're going to open up our stream for anyone to come on the show and talk briefly about what they've done during Hacktoberfest. We will do that via the Hacktoberfest Discord. If we do this, I need to work out the logistics. So what my ask to you is, if you would like to see or participate in a show where lots of people who have done Hacktoberfest come on and talk about what they did during Hacktoberfest, let us know on the Hacktoberfest Discord. Jump into the Raise Devs channel down there in the partner section and just say like, hey, you're interested in this idea. If we get enough interest, we'll do it, but it will be logistically difficult. So I want to make sure the interest is there before we set that up. So if you're interested in that, come into the Discord, come down to the Raise Devs channel and let us know. So that's our schedule for next week. As I said, I'll put that on the Twitch page over the weekend. And other than that, last thing from me, our next show is in about 2 hours. That'll be with Stefan Young of Customer.io. And the last thing for me before I head off is, if you haven't heard of Raise.dev, we are a service to help you level up in your developer career. We have expert coaches, people like Chris Ewald, who I mentioned, who will help you get the experience you need to get to where you want to be in your career, whether it's your next job, a raise, a promotion, whatever it is. We will make sure that you get there, and we are completely for free whilst we're now here in early access. So you can find out more and sign up at Raise.dev. And other than that, I hope we see you later on in the show. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining us, and thank you again to our guest, Josh. Enjoy the rest of your days, and I will see you at the next one.